What follows is our interview with Matthew, an Attorneys for Freedom client who we defended in a criminal case. Matthew was charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. The allegations were that he illegally pointed his firearm at a prominent fire department official and the official's minor son in central Arizona. There was only one problem. It was all based on lies.
Turns out there was only one person that day that committed assault on a 15-year-old, and that was Mr. Parra.
In other words, they're trying to explain to you why he's behaving like this.
Right, but that doesn't mean it's okay.
We're going to tell you his story today. Stay tuned. This is attorneys Andy Marcantel and Joey Hamby from the Attorneys for Freedom law firm here today in the studio with another wonderful client testimonial and our good friend and client, Matthew. How you doing today, Matthew?
Oi.
I thought you could start by just introducing yourself to our listeners.
I'm Matthew Massucci, born and raised in New York, and I moved to Prescott, Arizona when I was 19 years old.
How old are you now?
27.
Okay. And so what brought you out to Prescott from New York?
I moved out here for job opportunities and just a change in pace, what I was used to out there on Long Island. So came out here, and then within a short time, I started working for a good company, making good money. I fell into a really good opportunity with housing. I was actually a groundskeeper for a camp for nonverbal autistic kids, and I had 35 acres, nice big house. I enjoyed Arizona for everything that it had to offer. You know, the good weather, outdoors, things like that.
Pretty good life.
Yeah, not bad.
And you moved out here at the age of 19 alone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Came here alone.
All your family's back in New York?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So everything was going great in your life. And how long were you living in Arizona before this incident happened?
I lived in Arizona for, I think it was 2 years, and then I left for about 6 months, went back home. Some family members weren't doing too well. And spent some time, and then I came back, and I had spent the remainder of the time there until I left at age 25.
Got it. Okay. So let's jump right into the incident. What happened on July 16th, 2023?
I had just recently flown a good friend of mine, who I refer to as my brother, out to live with me for a couple of weeks. He was going to work for mine and my friend's company. He had only been out for about a week, and him and my girlfriend at the time wanted some snacks. So I decided to take her and my dog down to the gas station to get some candy bars. And I drove down, I parked my car, I went in. I had a normal conversation with the clerk, who I see on a regular basis, 5 minutes away from my house.
So this was a Star Mart, correct?
Yeah, it was a Shell gas station with a Star Mart attachment. Yeah.
Which is just like a run-of-the-mill convenience store.
Right.
You pull up your vehicle. The only other human being in the car is your girlfriend. Your dog's in, the back seat or something like that. And so you pull up, you get out of the vehicle. You leave it running?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, and she's sitting in the passenger seat. And so you exit the driver's seat to go inside, buy some snacks.
When I exited the store, a car that was parked directly in front of the doors, there was very clearly 2 guys looking at me, saying something. I wasn't sure what. They were in their vehicle. By the time I passed their vehicle to get to mine, which was parked adjacent theirs, 2 doors had opened, and a guy that was much larger than me was screaming things and yelling at me and charging at me.
And you said that you hear the yelling before you get to your vehicle?
Yeah, as I came out of the store, the front of their vehicle was pointed directly at the door of the store. So when you left, you were looking inside their vehicle. And my car was parked adjacent to that, maybe a space over. You saw the passenger, and there was a face coming from the back seat, and they were clearly saying something to me. I didn't know what. I was outside the vehicle. I couldn't hear them.
So you hear yelling from inside of the vehicle.
Right.
And can you tell it's angry yelling at that point?
No, I didn't know what it was, but, they were very clearly looking at me. And then by the time I left the store and passed their vehicle, which no more than 15 feet, I was heading towards my vehicle. There was 2 guys out of a car, and one was, screaming, chasing me.
Okay, and so they got out, and what did you do at that point? You immediately, did you interact with the person who's screaming at you?
I didn't know what the reason was. I just saw a very upset guy who was very clearly intoxicated. That was the biggest thing, He was flaring his arms. He was moving like an intoxicated person would. And I was right next to my car. I'm not going to fight a guy that's intoxicated for no reason. So I tried to get to my car and leave, and he wouldn't let me. He followed me to my vehicle and then opened my car door, and he had every intention of harming me.
What seats did they get out of? Do you recall?
Yeah, they were both doors on my car side, so both passenger doors.
I see.
I retreated to my vehicle. He followed. He opened my car door, prevented me from closing it. I retrieved my firearm, which I had holstered in the center console. I put up my left hand to try to prevent him from ripping me out of my car. He was very clearly heavily intoxicated.
So let's slow that down. When you say he opened your car door, had you already closed the door, or was it like halfway open?
I had already opened, and by the time I had opened and sat in my car, he was in the car door opening. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't close my car door. Mm-hmm. He had one hand on the door, and he's screaming, I don't know what he's screaming. And this took place over 2 years ago now.
Just to paint the picture, for you now sitting in your car, you got this guy yelling at you. What's the physical characteristics of this guy? Is this a small guy, a big guy?
He's a relatively big guy. I mean, I think I'm 6 foot, 150 pounds. I'm not a big guy. I'm a skinny guy. But he was bigger than me, much more larger than I was in size. And the part that was intimidating and I was concerned, if you're intoxicated, you're not thinking clearly. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what this guy is capable of doing, and his own family is telling me, he's messed up right now, da-da-da-da-da. His son, I overheard him saying that his brother just died and things like this. And he was very emotional, very worked up. And he was even at some point trying to stop his father, and he couldn't. The guy was very aggravated for whatever reason. It was, 10 seconds that I walked out of the store, and he was in my car. So I had my firearm at, low ready position and established a safe distance to try to prevent him from entering my car further. Then he saw my firearm and he started yelling, "What are you going to do, shoot me? I'm a chief of the fire police," whatever. Luckily, his wife was able to pull him away enough to where I was able to close my car door. And I closed my car door and I left,
Had you used any drugs or alcohol that night?
No.
Okay. So when you say the family is trying to calm him down, and we're going to talk about the video where you can see his son come up behind him and try to pull him away. But do you remember what his son was yelling at the time?
I had heard multiple things in regards to his brother passing. It's the night of a funeral. And all of those things are legitimate things to be upset about. But it's not legitimate to get intoxicated and then harm somebody because you're upset about something. That's not legitimate.
So could you tell at the time, because I understand since then you've read police reports and everything, we've gone over a lot of evidence with you, but at the time, did you have any inkling as to why this guy was upset with you?
None. Other than, I didn't look like the people that he's used to seeing. That's the only thing I could explain.
Did he say
they labeled me as a Hispanic male. I'm not Hispanic, And multiple times throughout that, they said Hispanic male,
I see. Okay. What's your girlfriend doing, by the way, while all this is happening? She's sitting in the passenger seat.
She was scared. She didn't know what was going on, She just seen me come out of the gas station thinking she's going to get her candy that she had asked for, and she gets a pretty large dude cursing, screaming, chasing me to the car. And this all happened so quickly, and there was no reason for it. I didn't do anything. I didn't aggravate them in any way. I didn't approach them in any way. So she didn't know what was happening, just the same as I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was there's a pretty large dude that's trying to rip me out of my car right now and hurt me. Mm-hmm. That's all I knew.
Fair enough.
5 days after that, I get pulled over on my way home from work. My brother was in the car with me, worked about a 10-hour day. I had stopped at Sprouts to buy some groceries, quite a bit of groceries I had picked up. And on the way home, I get 2 cars behind me. I wasn't breaking any traffic laws, so I didn't quite know why I was being pulled over, but I pulled over immediately. Nobody approached my vehicle. Then I'm looking in the mirrors and they tell me, put your hands on the ceiling. So I put my hands on the ceiling. 2 cars turns to 4 cars. turns to 8 cars. I hear brakes squealing, they shut the road down, and I'm just being told to sit there with my hands on the ceiling. Eventually,
They're speaking to you through a loudspeaker?
Yeah, over a microphone.
Gotcha.
And I see they have large weapons pointed at me, Every one of them are armed. And they exit my brother out of the vehicle from the passenger side. They exit him first. And I was, doing everything that they said, but at one point they had asked me to exit the vehicle, and I was seat buckled. So then I yelled back, I got my seatbelt on, and they couldn't hear me. So then when I reached to do it, they shouted, don't move. And I could have been shot at any point.
No doubt.
It was very scary.
The incident happened on the 16th, and then according to the police reports, that what they call the high-risk felony stop happened on the 20th of July, 2023. And you described it, and I'm sure that was horrific. There was that one part where you're talking about where they're giving you instructions to come out.
Yeah.
And those types of instructions, if they're sloppily given like they were, that can get people killed.
Yeah.
We've seen many high-profile examples of that, where the cops give instructions, confusing instructions, or they seem to kind of conflict with other things that they're barking out orders. And they can interpret that, if you're going with your hand down to take your seatbelt off, as if you're going for a firearm and then light you up.
Right.
So very, very lucky that didn't happen. You were smart to try to communicate with them and yell out the window rather than just take your
The biggest
seatbelt
thing
off.
with that is, at one point when I exited the vehicle and I was walking backwards, he said to lift my shirt. So I went to lift the bottom of my shirt, and he said, no, stop, from the neck, But that wasn't the request you just gave me. So multiple times during that, I could have been killed.
Yeah, I mean, any one of these missteps by the police giving you these orders could have resulted in an officer saying, well, at that point I was in fear for my life, and so then I shot. So these are, if people don't believe that, they need only go to YouTube and search a few of the high-profile examples of cops giving orders and then the suspect following the orders and then end up getting shot for their trouble.
Yep.
So.
And if you watch the video of the stop, and I know you have, like we have many times, you're given conflicting orders at all different times, which, again, could have ended up in a very bad situation, where first they tell you, put your hands outside the vehicle, then they tell you, put your hands on the ceiling of the vehicle, and then have you hold there for minutes. Not just seconds, but minutes.
10 minutes, I feel.
Yeah. And they have your brother, your close friend, get out of the vehicle. And then again, when you're trying to get out of the vehicle, you're in your seatbelt. Also another problem. And then they tell you, climb out over the center console and get out the passenger door.
Right.
Again, just bizarre stuff that if you don't know who's in that car and what kind of physical condition they're in, if they can even do that in a small car.
Right.
So it just was a very, very dangerous situation. And I know that you didn't know this at the time, that as you're watching the video with law enforcement, this is all on dash cam and body cam, multiple times they're talking about getting lethal force. One officer is saying, get lethal, get lethal. Another officer is saying, do we want lethal? Like, yes, get lethal. And they're pointing, as you said, all of their long guns at you, shotgun, I think I saw one time, AR-15, other firearms. And again, police cars are just coming up, sirens wailing, brakes squealing. It's a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was communicated to these officers before that stop was, this is a dangerous man who pointed a gun at a fire chief in our town.
Right.
That's what they knew. And so they were treating it as if you were an armed and dangerous suspect who was out to potentially harm them. And that's clearly reflected in how they responded to it.
Well, that's the thing. And if they, had done their due diligence as a police force to try to find the truth, they could have done so many different things. But they didn't do that. They proceeded with extreme prejudice because of this man's status in the small town that I was in.
Sure.
So I wasn't given a fair break at anything. So I got out, and they arrested me. They said, do you know what this is for? I said, no. They said, it's for an incident that happened at a gas station a week ago. And I went into an interrogation room. He had a file with my photo in the gas station. And he said, I'm going to ask you some questions. I opted to plead the fifth. And when I did that, he said, we got you on camera. And he closed the file. I was arrested for 4 felony charges, 2 counts of aggravated assault, 2 counts of committing a felony with a firearm. And I, was alone. I was scared. I didn't know who to go to because obviously I knew I didn't do the things that they were telling me I did. But I saw that I was being treated as I did do the things they said I did.
What were they saying that you did?
They said I pointed my firearm at a man's chest, and then I went up to their vehicle for no apparent reason, became verbally aggressive, and then presented a firearm and pointed it at his chest. I had a witness in my vehicle. There was video cameras that could show that. None of that was taken into consideration. The only thing that was taken into consideration was this guy's status in the fire department that led to this case being the way it was handled.
I'm sure in that moment, you're in the police station. They're telling you all this BS that you know is not true. There must have been a temptation to explain yourself and talk to them and try to talk your way out of it.
Not in the slightest.
Oh, and it warms my heart to hear that because you did absolutely the right thing. This is always rule number 1, which is just shut up when the police are asking questions. And I'm sorry to say most of our clients can't resist that urge, right? They're being accused of all these lies and they want to talk their way out of it and explain themselves. You did the right thing because you didn't see the surveillance footage at the time. No. You didn't know what your girlfriend who was in the passenger seat was going to say if interviewed by the cops. You didn't even know what this family were alleging at the time. So that's the worst time to try to talk your way out of it before you see all the evidence. So very nicely done, A+ on invoking your rights. And then to kind of conclude this first part of the story, you're in the police station, you invoke your rights. The cop says, well, we got you on camera, so you're dead to rights anyway. Yep. And even if you don't want to talk to me, and then slams the file dramatically, and then you're off to jail. Yeah. Tell us about your jail time. How long were you in there, if you had to post bond, all that stuff?
They initially brought me into the jailhouse in Prescott. So I was in there for about a night, and then they transferred me over to Camp Verde. And I was in there for about 2 nights, I believe. Luckily, I was able to post their cash bond that they wanted me out at. It was $20,000 cash they wanted. So I posted that, and I hired an attorney. And initially, this police officer that arrested me had called my father and told him, we got your son on camera threatening a family with a firearm. Within a week, we go to a court appearance. I don't even enter the courtroom. My attorney goes in, he comes out within minutes, tells me that they refuse to press felony charges. That's the way he worded things. Me being aware of this small town that I was in and seeing just how this had already unfolded, I didn't feel safe staying in this town. So I opted to leave. So I did so. I asked my current counsel, am I, good to leave the state and go home to New York? Because I don't want to even be around here anymore. And he said, yeah, you're good. Go ahead. I'll let you know if anything happens. And then a year later, I'm hearing that the charges are still being active.
Yeah, let's talk about that. How did you find out? So now you're back living in New York. You gave up this great life that you described in Prescott. You gave up that nice job that you had. You gave up your nice property that you had. You gave up your life.
Yep.
And the reason you did it is because you didn't feel safe.
Yeah. I knew that this guy, being a fire chief, he had friends not only in the police force, but just in the community. And I was scared that, I was going to either be pulled over and be put in a similar situation as the traffic stop or, just truly run into the similar situation as this with them being intoxicated and wanting to harm me for some reason. So I left.
So you moved back with your family in New York. How did you find out a year later that they had rebrought the charges?
I reached out to my attorney because I never got any closure. He never said the case is dismissed, it's closed, anything like that. They still had my firearm and evidence, so it was still over my head. I was thinking about the case almost every day.
So when he told you they refused to bring felony charges, right, what he was telling you is basically, in your mind, it wasn't done yet.
Right. No.
And in the way that he conveyed it was basically, look, they can rebring the charges any day now.
Right.
So don't get too comfortable.
Right.
So
but he kind of left it open. He left it open as they refuse to press charges. There's a reason they refuse to press charges. They don't feel there's a case, right? So that's a hopeful thinking for me. But I'm aware of the facts that this wasn't being handled properly.
So he made it sound like it was done.
Right.
But it seemed fishy to you that if it's done, why do they still have my firearm and
Correct.
evidence?
Correct.
Why can't I get that back?
Yeah.
And just for clarification, you hadn't even seen a police report at that point.
No, and
You didn't even know what they were accusing you of.
No, and I didn't have any discovery of the evidence that was, being used against me. Even in the statements, I mean, there's 3 separate statements. The initial 911 call, separate call that I believe 911 made to the wife because the statement of the husband couldn't be taken because he was so intoxicated. So there's multiple statements, and if you listen to them, all of those statements contradict the other ones.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the evidence for sure. But I kind of want to lead up to meeting you. And so where we're at now is you're in New York. You're back with your family. You gave up this awesome life, and you got this thing hanging over your head without closure.
I contacted my lawyer because I did want closure. I wanted to be able to tell my mother that she didn't have to worry about her son going to prison. And day after I contacted him, hey, can I move past this? Are things done? Will we get a letter of dismissal? He contacted me and said they're picking up the charges. But now instead of 4 charges, it's only 3. 2 aggravated assaults with 1 disorderly, committing felony with a firearm. But all still very serious charges, and that I had a court appearance in a month, and I had to appear in court.
I think just by my reading of the timeline of the charges of the case, that was probably towards the end of 2024. Just with you hiring us in the spring of 2025.
Right.
Did your lawyer at the time explain to you clearly how serious the charges were that you were facing? Because these are mandatory prison under Arizona law, 5 to 15 years apiece for the ag assaults.
But there was always just a continuance. Every early disposition court, it was just another continuance. Nothing being said, nothing being done. And that's when, my mother had a grand mal seizure directly related to the stress of this case. It went on for so long and nothing's happening. It's just the same thing being continued. So that's when I finally said, I got to call somebody else. We did our due diligence. We found you guys, luckily. And within, I think it was 2 months or 3 months, not even, you guys had the external video footage, which I was told by my previous counsel there was no external footage.
But you'd said in a police department and they showed you a
picture of
it.
me inside the gas station, but they didn't show me outside the gas station.
Got it.
But that external video is what proved that these people were lying, And that was something that my previous counsel said was non-existent.
Sure.
So first of all, going back to the night all this happened, you got your door closed and you drove off quickly.
Right.
That was the end of it.
Right.
As far as you knew, nothing else was going on.
Yeah.
And obviously now as we sit and view not just the video, but the police reports and the 911 calls, we know that wasn't what happened.
Right.
One question for you in all of that, Matthew. Did you or your girlfriend ever think about calling 911 after you'd left and kind of gotten away from these people?
Truly, it didn't cross our minds.
Okay.
We thought it was going to be, this guy's clearly drunk.
A crazy drunk guy. Nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt.
You're
go
done.
home, let him keep drinking. They left the store with more alcohol. Let them go home, keep drinking, and that was it.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to point out here, and we may get to this later on as well, but when that guy's in your door and angry and belligerent and won't let you close the door and won't let you leave, that's when you displayed your firearm. Is that the way it worked?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever point it at him?
No, sir.
Okay. But at that moment in Arizona, with that guy in your face, attacking you essentially, you could have shot and killed this man.
I was aware of that.
Okay. Why didn't you do that, Matthew?
That's something, I don't want to end the man's life. I don't know him.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to destroy another human being, would you?
I don't want to end nobody's life. I'm not a bad guy.
Yeah. Wish they'd felt the same way about your life.
Well, that's the thing. Their lies and their continuance to lie throughout the process shows that they were more than willing to end my life, not in so much as the direct way, as we were saying, but still, nonetheless, they were willing to end my life, whether it be me being shot by the police or me being in prison for the rest of my life. And I chose not to hurt the guy.
When you saw the police report and you saw their version of events, how did you react to it?
It was honestly until I got my discovery, which was later in this process. It was maybe 2 or 3 early disposition courts in that I finally got the evidence that they apparently had against me. And that's when I was really able to see just how off everything was.
And let's be clear on that. When you're talking about these early disposition courts, this is after the charges are filed the second time.
Yeah.
So this happens July 16 of 2023. Then you get bailed out after being in jail for 3 days. Then you go to court and you're told, case is over, move on with life.
Right.
And you do. You move back to your family. Now, we have the second document now that is filed in this case. This wasn't filed until January 15 of 2025. That means July of 23, July of 24, a full year. Now, January of 25, a year and a half has gone by from the time all this occurred until the time that the charges are filed. And now it's a few months after that that you, for the very first time ever, get a police report.
Right.
Now, I can't imagine, Matthew, what was going through your mind, but you lived through this, you remembered what happened, and now you're reading this police report. I mean, it must have felt like you were in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it was. I knew that nothing that was being said was the truth, so that was somewhat relieving of me, you know? I knew what the truth was, and I know that I had somebody in the car with me, thankfully, that knew what the truth was. It was extremely stressful, and it didn't only affect me, it affected my family.
Well, before we get to meeting you and commencing our representation of you, I want to talk about those lies. I want to talk about what the alleged victims in this case, remember we have the listed victims now of the fire chief and his minor son, his 15-year-old son. And so the version that they gave to the police was very, very different than the version that you just gave. So tell us what they said happened.
In one of the reports, they said, for no apparent reason, I became verbally aggressive and approached their vehicle, went out of my way to approach their vehicle and walk around their vehicle. And then I presented a firearm after the father got out to protect his underage children, who I didn't even know they were underage children, number one. And number two, my interaction wasn't with them, it was with him. They said I walked around the car, I became verbally aggressive, and then I presented a firearm from my waistband and pointed it at his chest. That didn't happen.
And so focusing on that for a second, because when we go back and we look, now we see multiple angles from security camera there at the gas station. And it is very apparent, Matthew, as you're walking out of that store. First of all, you have no option other than to walk by their vehicle because they parked right in front of the door. And secondly, you don't even pause. There's not even a hesitation in your step. You're just walking straight past the vehicle through the next empty parking spot over to your vehicle.
Right.
And you never approach their vehicle. It looks like you don't even glance in the direction of this vehicle hardly, maybe just looking at it because it was right there as you walked out the door. You certainly not saying anything in the direction of the vehicle. It is truly an innocuous, completely unremarkable event until this guy starts getting angry at you.
Right.
And it was even more specific, these lies that the family told. And when we're saying that they lied, we're not just talking about the fire chief here. We're talking about his family. Unfortunately, this became a family affair where they all kind of colluded together, starting with the wife's statement that she gave to the cops. Very, very specific allegation. She's saying that you walked out of the store, circled the vehicle, saw her child through the glass, all the while she's claiming I was inside of the store, witnessing this from inside of the store. And she claims that you yelled, "I'm going to kick a 15-year-old's ass tonight." And that's why, according to her, her husband got out of the car in order to just have a friendly chat with you, have a word with you about you shouldn't be disrespectful to teenagers. And then at that point, you victimized the family by pointing your firearm at them. That was their version. Right. And then the cops asked the son, who's listed as a victim now in the case, is that what happened? He says, yep, that's what happened. Of course, you alluded to this earlier. They tried to interview the chief that night, and he was unable to give a statement.
Right.
And the reason that they noted was because he was too intoxicated to give a statement. That level of intoxication that's required to not even be able to give a statement is very significant.
Right.
We have cases all the time where people are intoxicated, whether it be witnesses or victims or our clients, and the cops will still get a statement from people who are intoxicated. Right. To be at a level of intoxication that you can't even give a statement, it's pretty astounding. It's rare. I mean, that is very intoxicated.
And yet he was asked to ID me later on.
Right.
And yet he was too intoxicated to give a statement that night. But now, a year later, he's being asked to identify me.
Yeah.
And just focusing in again on some of the false accusations that were made about you. And I know this may not seem a big deal to people who are watching this, because if they're all lies, then what's the difference? Well, there is a difference between somebody just making kind of an off-the-cuff statement that's not true and one that's really targeted and very malicious. And so this statement about you taking a gun out of your waistband. So let's focus on that for just a second. So first of all, where was the gun located?
At the time, I had it holstered in my center console, in between the seat and the center console.
So definitely not in a waistband anywhere.
I was wearing basketball shorts and flip-flops. Couldn't carry a gun on my waistband, and sports shorts if I wanted to.
Yeah. And so there's no way in the world that you had it on your body, but that would make a difference in this situation. And the reason it makes a difference is if you're getting it out of your waistband and you're threatening them, this sounds an awful lot like all this is happening outside of your car, which is really significant in Arizona. Because when you're in your vehicle, it's treated for many purposes as if you're in your home under Arizona's castle doctrine. And if somebody's invading your home or invading your car, that puts them in a really bad legal position. And I don't know if this is something that these folks had experience with or not, but clearly that's a very specific false allegation, and it's a very important false allegation that you're carrying your gun on your body, that you're threatening this official, and that you're threatening his minor son. So these are very specific and focused lies, and they're very important lies.
Right.
And you're reading this stuff, and you've got to be saying, what in the world's going on? I'm not carrying a gun on my body. It's in my vehicle. I never pointed at these people, and I'm never pointing it at these people, and I'm only displaying it, which I'm allowed to do in Arizona, is to defensively display a firearm to stop somebody from attacking me.
Right.
Let me ask you, when you displayed the firearm, did that stop him from attacking you?
Sure did.
It worked.
Sure did. Well, as soon as he saw my firearm, he started shouting, what are you going to do, shoot me? I'm a fire chief. And I told him, if you don't leave me alone, then yeah, I will. And by then, his wife came out of the store, luckily, was able to pull him from my vehicle, and I was able to close my door, which is the only thing I was trying to do, was just close my door and leave.
In Matthew's conversation with you, Andy, I think I understood that your attorney had told you something, though, very specific about the case and about what you were facing and what you might have to take.
Yeah.
What did he tell you about that specifically?
He told me that I may be looking at some jail time because they may want to, something this serious is maybe mandated. And they may not want to just completely go for a dismissal because then, and he even said this, they don't want to dismiss it because it shows that they were wrong. And the fact that they dismissed it twice in a sense, from my initial arrest and appearance to then a year and a half later dismissing it again. My attorney told me, it wouldn't look very good for them to do so. Mm-hmm. It's not about what looks good for them. It's my life, and I was severely impacted by this. And that's why I'm glad I got you guys. Was
there a point in time where your attorney had said something like, look, Matthew, this was an important man. You're going to have to take a felony. You're looking at time. I'm just trying to get that time reduced.
He did stress the so-called victim in this case, his status, and especially when it came to the continuance of the appearances. He said, this may be them trying to protect his job in a way, them continuing you out. He may be, retiring soon or something along those lines, and it wouldn't look good for him if this case comes about and it starts shedding some light on things. And the fact that he lied would come to truth. So yeah, his status, my lawyer actively told me that this guy's status was affecting the case.
So that's when I met you and your family. And I remember we met because we had a consultation on Zoom, and your parents wanted to be in on the phone call. And as you said, you were just kind of at wit's end with your current lawyer. Not a lot was happening, and you just didn't have confidence there. And so you researched our law firm, you reached out to us, and we set up a Zoom call for a strategy session. And I remember you guys were in New York at the time, if I remember correctly. I was talking to the whole family. Matthew, I remember the tone of that conversation at the beginning when we got on that call compared to the tone at the end of that conversation. The tone at the beginning, I felt like I was looking at a family that was just beaten down at their wits' end, clearly depressed and sad and fatalistic. I remember your mom saying something like, look, we know that he's got to do some time. We know he's probably going to end up with a felony. We're just getting a second opinion. You know, we hired a guy who's local and they know what they're doing. We think he knows what he's doing. We understand our son may have to take a felony. And I said, well, calm down. Let's talk about the case. Let's hear the facts and let's hear about what the evidence says. And of course, you hadn't seen the video. You were told the video of the outside camera didn't even exist at that point.
Yeah.
But notably, the police report said that there was a video. So we talked. And we talked for like an hour about the facts of the case. And as I always do, I want to get all the facts first before I give the family my legal analysis. And I remember the tone of the conversation changed pretty abruptly when I explained to your family, if the evidence corroborates what you're telling me right now, not only should your son not be going to prison, this case needs to be dismissed immediately. Immediately. And I remember that was a breath of fresh air to your family. They had hope again. They had just kind of resigned that our son is going to be going away for a while because the person that's involved with this is very important in that town.
Right.
So we went about on trying to obtain the evidence in this case. Obviously, the surveillance camera is very important. So Joey and I reached out to your prior counsel to take the case over.
I kind of couldn't deal with it anymore, so I had hired, you guys. I didn't disclose to him who I hired. I just disclosed that I hired another attorney and that they were going to be working on my case.
Well, he found out pretty quick because we called him shortly thereafter and said, we're taking over the case. What's been done so far? Give us an update. This is a common thing when people switch attorneys. There's usually a call between the incoming new legal team and the previous legal team to get an update on where the case is and what's been done, what's been filed, and what are the next steps. And he shared with us that the state is planning on taking this case to a grand jury to get an indictment against you for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Now, Joey and I saw this as actually a potential benefit because as you can explain, Joey, about Trebus and everything like that.
For folks who are watching, in almost every state and in federal court, you can't simply be accused of a crime and then move on to trial. The government has to do something more than just say Matthew committed an offense or Joey committed an offense, right? So prosecutors do this all the time where they file a complaint. That's just a written document where they're accusing you of a specific act. However, in order to move forward, it's got to be more than just their word. There's got to be a probable cause determination. So somebody that's not the prosecutor and not the police has to determine whether or not there's probable cause to believe that you committed the acts you're accused of. And in Arizona and in most jurisdictions, you can get there one of two ways. One, you can put on what's called a preliminary hearing. That's a hearing where the government goes in front of a neutral magistrate or a judge, and they have to put on their evidence. They usually bring in a police officer, and the rules are different. It's not a trial. It's not in front of a jury. They don't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. They've just got to show that there's probable cause to believe. So it's really not even preponderance of the evidence. It's a lower standard than that. But most prosecutors in Arizona don't like doing that because when they do that, you have the ability to be there. Your attorney has the ability to be there. Your attorney can cross-examine your accusers. Your attorney can even offer evidence to the court. And this isn't a situation where that would have worked out well at all. And so the next way to obtain a charge against a person is to go in front of a grand jury. And in Arizona and in most jurisdictions, these are secret proceedings. You don't have the right to be there. Your attorney doesn't have the right to be there. You don't have the right to cross-examine the accusers. You don't have the right to present evidence. This is why we say about grand juries that in front of a grand jury you can indict a ham sandwich.
Right.
That's just
My
a
lawyer
saying.
did say that. He
Yeah,
did say that.
but there are specific tools that your attorney can use in this situation that most people don't know anything at all about. And I'm going to tell you, this is where your case actually pivoted. And this is something that I don't think you knew about and that most people never know about. So when a prosecutor is going to go to a grand jury, it's their obligation to observe your due process rights, which means presenting facts that are clearly exculpatory. They can't hide facts that say, oh, Matthew didn't do it. They have to present that to the grand jury to observe your rights to due process under the United States Constitution. And so it gives us, as your counsel, the opportunity to send exculpatory information to the prosecutor. And so after talking with you and getting some, not all of the evidence, we were very confident that if a grand jury were to hear this information, there's no way they would return an indictment in your case. And so we presented actually 2 very specific and highly detailed letters to the prosecutor saying, when you go to the grand jury, first of all, Matthew denies that he did any of this. Secondly, Matthew wishes to be there to testify to the grand jury because, at least in Arizona, if you notify the prosecutor of that, they have to let the grand jury know that you're willing to show up and testify. And they can invite you to come in and testify under oath. And then 3, we provided very specific factual statements to say, here's what happened and here's what you have to present to the grand jury. And if you fail to do that, we're going to ask to have the indictment thrown out. That's where the wheels came off of the track for this case, because the prosecutor got those letters and then started going back and looking at the evidence and specifically looked at the video. And then he called Andy and I and he said, guys, I don't see what you're looking at in the videos. I think you're wrong. He said, actually, I think a lot of the things that you're presenting to me are correct, but I think you're wrong about the video, because we had explained to him, this man stood in your doorway and wouldn't let you leave before you displayed a firearm. And to his credit, the prosecutor went back through and looked at this now very specifically, instead of just taking the word of the police officers, which has been what had been happening up to that point. We presented that information to him, and he started looking, but he couldn't see it. And that's where we come down to the videos and to the enhancement and all the work that was done there to show this to the prosecutor.
Well, I want to say one more thing about that initial phone call that we had with the prosecutor in this case. And I will say, got to give credit where credit's due. Even though he missed a lot of these important points, he was willing to hear us out, and he was willing to actually go to pretty far lengths as far as prosecutors are concerned to entertain the evidence that we were giving him. We'll talk about his visit to our law firm very shortly here. But during that initial phone call, we're kind of feeling out a prosecutor, taking their temperature, seeing how serious he was about this. And when we got on the phone with him, he was very damn serious about bringing these aggravated assault charges to a grand jury. He believed you are guilty, and he believed every word that the Parra family had reported to the police. There are sometimes things that to you they're really obvious in life, but you understand that somebody else the light bulb hasn't turned on yet. And there was such an instance in this case from the very beginning when I saw the police report and I saw the statements made by the Parra family. And that was that one particular very specific statement that you allegedly made as you were circling their vehicle. I'm going to kick a 15-year-old's ass tonight. That always rubbed me as obviously false. And the reason is because how could you look through the glass at night and figure out that the person that you're looking at is exactly 15 years old? Not 14, not 16, not 13, not 17. You were able to immediately discern the age, according to the Parra family.
And for no apparent reason.
And I think it's worth reading.
Yeah.
I think it's worth reading.
Yeah,
because this is not our opinion. Yeah. This is the quote, and this was the contact with the wife, the other adult in the situation. She said, while she was inside, a Hispanic male approached her vehicle and was staring at her daughter. The male mumbled something, according to her, to the daughter. Then her son looked at the male and said, what? And they asked, well, what did the male do after that? She said, he walked around her vehicle and said, quote, I'm going to kick a 15-year-old ass, close quote. That's what they're saying. And this is her statement. And we know for a fact, because we watch her on video, that she's in the store, not even looking at you. So in other words, the door's closed, you're outside, she's not even looking at you.
Yeah, as we'll show in the video when we got it later on, and this is funny, as Joey put it, she was buying 2 suitcases full of beer at the time when this incident was happening. So she was looking at the clerk while the action was going on. But back to our conversation with the prosecutor while we're taking his temperature and kind of trying our best to reconfigure his brain about the severity of this case and the veracity of the claims made by the Parra family. I said, Mike, the prosecutor's name's Mike, I said, Mike, we're obviously dealing with some false statements here. I mean, maybe you believe some things the Parra said, but we can both agree there's some lies going on. His response, I don't believe that. I have no reason not to doubt anything that they're saying. I said, that 15-year-old ass comment, let's talk about that. We both agree that these families have never met before in their lives, right? The Parra family doesn't know my client at all. No, yeah, we can agree on that. They don't seem to have any history. So tell me how my client can accurately perceive the exact age of a 15-year-old through the glass at night, having never met them before.
And I don't talk like that.
To me, that is it. Well, Mike doesn't know you and how you talk, but to me, that is so obvious.
Yeah.
And Mike was like, oh, yeah, I guess that does make sense. How would he know the specific age of the child he's never encountered before? So a simple thing like that it was the first little initial thread that was pulled that started leading to more and more. But as Joey pointed out, we were even sitting there on the phone with him, talking to him about different timestamps of the video, saying, here's what happened, here's what happened, here's what happened. He just wasn't seeing it. He just wasn't seeing it. And to be fair, this is not a crystal clear video, right? We're showing images of it on the screen right now. This is a grainy, nighttime, convenience store surveillance camera quality video. So to be fair to Mike, it wasn't crystal clear obvious until we got our expert involved.
Yep. Also, there's another factor here, which this happens all the time with video, and people have this preconceived idea, this bias that, well, if it's on video, that shows everything. And it doesn't. And this case is a great example of it for many reasons. One, the lighting. It's dark, it's grainy, it's low resolution. 2, the angle. So the angle of the various cameras doesn't show all of the action that's going on. Most importantly, on the camera that for us was really, really important, the exterior camera that at least caught a portion of your vehicle and caught the most critical information here, there's technical problems with the camera. At one point, all of a sudden, it just drops several seconds. Doesn't even show what's going on. Don't have any explanation for that. Still don't know today because, again, with the case dismissed, we don't have the ability to go out and subpoena people and, get the raw footage, if it even exists anymore 2 years later. But what the police captured that evening, at least, there's a chunk of time missing that's pretty important. It's the lead up to the most important section, which shows this guy standing in your door. But there are many problems with this. And so one of the things we had to do was, first of all, find, does this show what we think it shows? And then secondly, get an expert involved who could actually do a lot more with this than we could.
So that's when Dr. Black enters the story, and he's an expert that we use to do forensic analysis on videos. We've worked with him in the past, and he happened to actually be in the office that day because I think we were filming a podcast talking about a big Supreme Court case with him that day. And he was like, hey, let me help you out with that video enhancement because he knew about the case. And he hopped on and he did his thing. And he was able to zoom in and enhance and change saturation and everything like that such that it made it much more clear. So we called up the prosecutor again and we coordinated with him to have him actually come into the office and sit down with us in our conference room and blow it up on the big screen and walk him through piece by piece. Slow motion, pause, here's the timestamp, here's the date stamp, here's what happened. And once we did that, and to his credit, it's a little unorthodox. The prosecutor was willing to do that, come in and actually sit down with us. I think after that first conversation of slightly reconfiguring his brain and making him ask a few questions like, maybe what the Parra family is saying isn't 100% gospel. He came in with an open mind, I think, to that meeting.
And what led up to that was by the time we had this video enhanced, he could see that there were numerous problems with the statements that were made. And he was actually starting to say, I think we've got some real issues here. But the one fact that kept hanging him up was he's telling us, like, look, Andy, look, Joey, your guy is saying that Mr. Parra is inside his door. So then I don't see that. I can't see any evidence of that. And that's a big factor that your guy's saying he's inside the door, and that's when he displayed the firearm. Why? Again, go back to Arizona's castle doctrine. The prosecutor knows that if this guy is inside your door, preventing you from closing the door and threatening you, that first of all, now Arizona's castle doctrine kicks in. There's a presumption that this guy is there to do something bad to you, to commit a crime against you, and you can shoot and kill him. And the prosecutor is concerned about that. That's a really big issue. The other problem is that would show that Mr. Parra is the one that's actually committing a crime against you. These are both really big legal issues. And so that one little issue of was your door open or was your door closed was a very huge fact and a very big legal issue. And so we kept telling him, Mike, the door is open. You can see him standing inside Matthew's open door, and he just couldn't see it. Mm-hmm. We said, Mike, would you please come to the office? We'll walk you through it. If you can't come to our office, we'll come to yours. And he said, I'll come to your office, which was a drive. He came to our office. As Andy was saying, we had this enhanced video. We put it up on our very large screen. We all stood there right in front of it, and we walked through it frame by frame. And you should have seen his face when we're pointing out the section of your car and we're saying, look, you can see Mr. Parra's legs through your open door. We're looking down through your windshield and you see him standing there. And he's like, oh, wow. And then the real conclusion to this is you can see your arm reach out and pull the door shut. Should have seen his face when that happened. There's no question whatsoever that the things that you were saying were 100% right, that this guy was being untruthful and was making statements that they were just flatly false.
And the things that the Parra family were saying were 100% wrong. And you think to yourself, if somebody's watching this podcast and thinking, how could they possibly miss this stuff? It happens all of the time, of the time. The video's grainy, and the cops have in their mind, it's kind of like confirmation bias. They have in their mind what happens in that grainy, blurry scene, and they don't take the time to sit down, enhance it, blow it up, and actually see what happens. So in sum, what the video shows, and we'll show the clips as we're talking about it right now, it shows you buy something at the convenience store, walk out, not walk around their car, simply walk over to your vehicle, get confronted by this man and pursued back to your vehicle. It shows you enter your vehicle, sit in it, and then you go to close your door and he positions himself in your doorway so that you cannot close it. It's even actually worse than that. You can see his arm pushed the vehicle open all the way. The vehicle's open maybe at about a 45-degree angle when he puts himself in there. And you can actually see him push it open all the way. Yeah. To put that in legal terms that are relevant here, he's demonstrating to you that he's ready to make an unlawful entry to harm you in your vehicle, in an occupied vehicle. So after that, as best as we can tell, you can see a family member come up and grab him, and he actually shoves the family member away. We believe that that family member is his 15-year-old son. So in other words, there's only one person who committed assault against a 15-year-old that night, and that was Mr. Parra. Then that luckily gives you enough time to get access to your firearm and display it and tell him, back up, back up. And then luckily that works. He's still talking smack to you, but his wife comes and then pulls him away. You close the door and drive away. So that is in sum exactly what the enhanced videos now much more clearly show.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, once we presented this to the prosecutor and once he came in, because it took maybe, a couple of phone calls and the meeting to convince him that, what I just described is actually what took place. To his credit, he now conceded that there's major problems in the state's case and that he did not believe that the charges should go forward.
Well, I was really impressed by what he said in court. So there was a court appearance where Mike had advised us, look, we're going to have to continue this one more time. I've got a lot of hoops to jump through, which he does. Any case where there's an alleged victim, he has to advise them of what's going on, and he has to advise his chain of command. And he realized this was going to have, some implications. And so he let us know he was going to have to continue it. You were at that hearing virtually. Andy was at that hearing virtually. We have that, and we can play that for our members.
On Thursday of last week, I went over personally to their office in Chandler to sit down and go through the original video plus their enhanced video. And what I saw with their assistance, Your Honor, was information that has caused me to become of the opinion that this case cannot and should not proceed.
He went on the record and advised the court, this is a serious issue, and, this case is probably going to have to be dismissed. I thought he was, again, very honorable.
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, and that's the happy ending here, is that the case was ultimately dismissed on the state's motion. But I'm sure many viewers are thinking, and I certainly am, the fact that the state finally did the right thing after we had to beat them over the head with it over the course of several months doesn't make you whole.
No.
Doesn't fix the damage that you got as a result of these lies and misconduct and incompetence on every level of the justice system. This is a story about what happens when you're victimized by somebody who's in the special club. Because you ain't in it, Matt.
No, I know
you
it.
ain't in it. You ain't in it. And somebody in that special club chose to victimize you that night. And after victimizing you, they then lied. He and his family lied about you in a coordinated effort, which caused severe damage. Because not only did you have this incredibly traumatic felony stop, which could have, as we pointed out several times, ended in your death or serious injury. Not only did you have to get taken down to the police station, treated like a criminal, not only did you have to do time in jail and take your family's valuable resources in order to be able to walk out of jail that day. Not only did you have to have this hanging over your head for the year while it was pending, in addition to all of that stuff, you had to pay for an attorney. You're not an attorney's on retainer client. Needless to say, if you were, this is the type of case that we would absolutely be covering because it's clear self-defense in our view. Despite what the police and the fire chief and the prosecutor thought. But in addition to all of that stuff, you were also flamed in the media. Can you talk about that? There was news stories about you.
Yeah, there was 4 news stations that put out, media releases on a police report that they had from the Prescott Police Department. But even that Prescott Police Department statement was different from the arrest statement. They had added things, changed things. And it just showed me more like, they don't have to, they're not following the rules. They're just saying whatever was said against me and that's it. So it was extremely, extremely stressful and scary,
And Prescott, once again, this is a small town. Many of our viewers right now who are watching live in a small town. And don't underestimate the fact that if there's 4 stories about you published in a small town, that's everybody in the town now knows.
It carried me to New York. When I first moved back to New York, I tried to start getting jobs. Now I need to find a new job. So I went back and I started, going to interviews. Some of these interviews would go great. They'd like me. They liked my experience, liked my references. But then I'd leave. They'd Google my name. They'd see that I was accused of threatening a family with a firearm. Who wants a guy like that working for them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't blame them, but that's not who I am. And it's the same thing with this family. They don't know who I am. They don't know who depends on me. They don't know who I love, who loves me. And yet they were so ready to just end my life, which is insane to think about,
And just think about the timing. July 16 of 2023. Here we sit today, August 18, 2025. Okay, this case wasn't dismissed until last month.
And you still don't have your firearm back.
Yeah.
It's still being held in police custody. We're working on getting that back for you, but it's outrageous.
Yeah.
Yep. So 2 years of this thing hanging over your life, destroying your life, losing your job, losing your place to live, having to move across the country, and then dealing with the fear and the anxiety. And most people don't realize the fear and the anxiety that comes every day when you wake up and you realize, oh, somebody wants me to go to prison. Somebody wants me to have a felony.
Can't stop thinking about it.
And all of this because you chose to do the right thing and not shoot a man dead
Right.
at the time and destroy him and his family's life. So quite a story for you, Matthew.
A couple of just auxiliary issues that I think are kind of to go back and clean up and smooth over a few parts of the story. From what we've learned, and this is through secondhand sources and police report and everything like that, we can't verify all this stuff. But from what we've learned, the reason why Mr. Parra was so heavily intoxicated that night is because I believe he was coming from a funeral. I think a close relative had just died. There's a sympathetic story about why he was in a depressed state, for sure. Of course, this does not justify in any way, shape, or form victimizing you. But then, after you're sober in the morning and you're still corroborating on lives with your family, as far as I'm concerned, this excuse is completely out the window. And the fact that he allowed this to go on, knowing that there was an innocent man that was being victimized from this, is one of the most outrageous parts of the entire story. So I think that's an important thing to mention. We've also discovered that since this incident, his life has been going pretty well. In fact, he was promoted. Chief Parra works at the Central Arizona Fire and Medical Authority, and he was recently promoted, I believe, in the fall of 2024 to the Deputy Chief of Operations with that organization. So his life has been moving up, and he's been doing just fine since this incident. All the while, your life has been in shambles, and you've had to deal with this craziness. We tell people this all the time. Even if you are ultimately acquitted, even if you eventually get a good defense and the charges are dismissed, you're not going to feel like a winner at the end. No. And so you've been wronged, no doubt about that. Any final thoughts that you wanted to leave our listeners with?
I want to say that, the only regret I have throughout this whole thing is not hiring you guys sooner. And if I had done so, I wouldn't have went through the year-long process of stress and anguish. You guys would have done your job and got me out of the situation much quicker.
It's tough, man. It's tough, especially if you've never been in trouble before. You don't know anything about the legal system. No. You don't know who's a good lawyer, who's not a good lawyer. I remember since the very first time we talked on that Zoom call with your whole family, I was outraged about this case. I was pissed off because it's the type of thing that we've seen many times, unfortunately, which is somebody who's in the club decides to victimize somebody who's not in the club. And we stand up for people who aren't in the club, even when it's unpopular, even when they're getting flamed in the media. And I believed in your case in the beginning. So thank you for allowing us the honor of representing you. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to hear Matthew's story. If you want to learn more about our program, go and check out attorneysonretainer.us. Learn all about our self-defense program and what it can do for you. Also, check out attorneysforfreedom.com. Learn all about our law firm and how we defend people in the criminal justice system. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Until next time, this has been attorneys Andy Marcantel, Joey Hamby, and our friend Matthew, signing out. Peace.